she called me and why no, I said I was going to come home. She called, you do it right. Just as serious. I got to go, what happened? She said it was like 3 people were hurt in the house, lovable walls, and the car, and we just walked around. She said it was like there was a murder. Like that. I go, because it's just, bleeding. We're trying to figure out what's going on. Touching the walls and clotting coming out. So, I, and he's like, red. Five minutes later, he was keeping him alive.
No, we're just talking about the
I said, no, my dad makes it. I'm never doing that. It's something.
no one but us was
No, I said, I told him to give me a story. He gets up, he gets in the car, he drives home.
I agree 100%.
That's how he is. He's 91.
It starts to go south.
Well,
Sorry, Ruth.
between
Thanks,
like
man.
85.
I work down there.
Thank you.
Thanks for moving things around.
Oh, no worries, no worries. That it's okay. I'm kind of good. No, they're still up there. I said like 132. So, I'm gonna, I'm working on that.
See, you know.
Yes.
I want to know. Tell me, 1:30. I want to know.
Yeah, I would.
Oh, I see them coming.
All right, I'll select you.
Thanks.
Nobody, what?
Just calling.
Hi.
Just calling, saying, where are you? Where are you?
We figured that you guys had it up to here and you all stayed.
For this?
Yeah.
Hey, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm sure it was.
Oh.
We moved.
All right, send me the request, I'll see what I can do.
This is something they send to me that I have no interest in.
I was just gonna say, for now, why not? That's awesome. I agree.
My daughter has her for a teacher, she doesn't make pages.
I don't know.
You know.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know anything.
I get that.
Really tell me what needs to be done.
She's still under the weather, huh?
Yeah.
One of those days.
I need water, so what is it?
There, yeah. There's a screw. See my leg. Validating your perception. Thank you. I don't think it's you. I think there's some extra noise in that chair.
Go to that, I haven't been there.
Nothing's clean.
I didn't see us in other communities.
How's everybody
Good. Our 3-year-old birthdays go. It was a lot of fun. It was good to see. I had 3 sons. It was good to see everybody.
Good afternoon. 1 minute. Did you see the new language in the public speaking stuff that we're doing? It's attached. We pulled it down. We took the 3 minutes and stuff out, the 3 minutes and 2 minutes, and used more of what Matt has. But there's no citations in there for the law or whatever of those things. Because we were like, if we go with Neola, it'll be a bylaw. If not, it'll be a procedure. Those are. Good afternoon. I'd like to call the, say monthly, I guess it's bi-monthly work sessions now. For October 5th, we're calling it to order at 1:45. We're a little delayed because we ran long on our executive sessions on labor and then safety and security. First up, we have Mr. Dumas, and it says Jane Drager, too, on policy review 7.71.
Thank you, and good afternoon, board members. And so I'm going to quickly turn this over to Jane Drager, our Director of Construction. Just in terms of process, though, this policy came before you in terms of a board workshop several months ago as a package of other policies for you to review with some minor changes we were suggesting. At that time, part of this policy requires an ad hoc review of a committee ad hoc review every 5 years. Because we were so close on that, the board recommended we get that done and bring it back. And so that's what's been accomplished, and that I'm going to let Jane introduce our guest and take you through that process today.
Good afternoon. I'm Jane Drager, the Director of Construction Services, and today I have Mary Doherty with me. She is.
We're having trouble hearing you. Can you either, there you go, closer.
Is this better? Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm Jane Drager. I'm the Director of Construction Services, and we convened our ad hoc committee. And I brought Mary Doherty with me today from the Gulf Coast Builders Exchange to go through that process with you and what we did and what we accomplished. So Mary, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, fellow board members. It's good to see you all for my every 5-year visit. So glad to be before you again. I'd like to thank your staff and my fellow members of the ad hoc committee for all their work on this and making my job here before you today relatively easy. Good afternoon, Dr. Asplin, also. This is regarding Board Policy 7.71 and 7.71A, Professional Services Selection Committee. As you may recall, back in 2016, on April 19th, there was a board workshop to discuss this same board policy, and on June 6th of 2016, a board meeting to approve the recommendations that were made at that time. Fast forward to 2021, and on 6/1/21, a board workshop noticing the revision to this policy. Comments from board members were CM post-project evaluations, which was implemented, did the first one in September, and requested an ad hoc committee reconvene. On July 16th, 2021, the ad hoc committee convened. CMs involved were McIntyre Elwell Strammer, Swift Construction, Tandem, Willis Smith, and it also included subcontractors Bright Future Electric, Key Glass, and myself as a representative of the industry for Gulf Coast Builders Exchange. Today, October 5th, 2021, we're here before this workshop to tell you what our recommendations are, and they'll come before you again on October 19th of this month at your board meeting for approval. The key changes to 7.71, a language cleanup to delete references to old titles, for example, design criteria architect. Section 2A, add director of purchasing or designee option to the 5th seat. Section 4C, delete mandatory pre-submission meetings. All firms who wish to submit must be pre-qualified. We can cover the pre-submission items during the pre-qualification process. This includes deleting reference to this meeting and other sections of the policy. Section 4S, increase continuing contract limits to $4 million for construction and $500,000 for design. This allows the district to utilize board-approved continuing contract design build firms for projects up to $4 million in compliance with Florida Statute 287.055. Section 4V allowed the CSD director to participate in the ad hoc committee. The director has historically participated in the meetings, provided the documentation, answered questions that arose, and coordinated the meetings. Compliance with new Florida statutes, specifically referencing new statutes that apply, such as 2.55025 and 255.20. Clear up ad hoc committee review every 5 years. One place said every 5 years, another place said 3. Historically, it has been every 5 years. Key changes, 7.71A, Section 1A and B, added purposes to be consistent with SCS board policy format, update score sheets, delete antiquated CM forms, provide the information required rather than the format. Scoring content did not change, just the old PDF form images were deleted. Important to note, no scoring criteria was changed, no submission requirements changed, except the format. So that is the extent of our recommendations, and once again, I'd like to thank your staff. My members truly appreciate working with your professionals on staff, Jody and Jane. We always ask for fairness and consistency, and we're glad to know that we get that with Sarasota County School Board.
Thank you. One of the things I noticed is you struck, was it 4C? The selection procedures, the one of the mandatory pre-application and pre-submission meeting. Are you striking it as mandatory, or is that being stricken totally? There's no pre-application meetings anymore?
Right. We're striking that completely because we pre-qualify everyone. So when we are in the process
Okay.
of pre-qualifying,
All right.
we go over all of those basic rules and the things that are required and things that we score on. We go over that with them. And I've had about 7 of them since I started here. They typically last 5 minutes. And they don't, the folks who attend don't learn anything new. And we do have ways of communicating with all of our pre-qualified firms if something arises that they need to be aware of before they submit.
Right. And the numbering system after that all has to be changed too, and I'll make sure our staff does that, because D will now become C, E will become D, and all. We'll have to renumber them too.
Perfect.
Are there any other questions or comments? Ms. Goodwin?
I just want to thank you for being here, Mary Doherty.
Always a pleasure.
A favorite friend of mine. And for all of the good work that your association does in the community and all of the good partnerships that we have. You have often said in publications and in other places that buying local is important.
Yes,
And I
ma'am.
certainly heartily agree with that. And I think it has served us well over the years to buy local. And we're very happy that we have your wonderful organization in our community because I think this makes the standards even more excellent. I think it makes the commercial construction arena even more critical in quality. So I just want to thank you for all that you're doing and for your partnership. And I love having our new construction services manager, and so look forward to working with you even more closely in the future.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and our members are proud to build your schools.
I echo those comments. That's, really, we really support you, and I'm glad that you've been working so well with us. And Jane, too. Jody, is this on the agenda today?
No, our intent was let you take a look at it today, kind of, the process that you'd like us to make sure we adhere to, and so it'll be on the next board agenda where you get the approval.
Yeah, we
and
just need on the when we put it on the agenda to change those letters.
Yeah, it's a good catch. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I see no more questions, and we are back on schedule because instead of 30 minutes, you all took 10.
I look forward to seeing you in 5 years.
Thank you so much.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
And stay where you are, Jody, because you're next. I think we were talking about solar powers for roofs. We were getting calls or emails from the public saying, why don't you put a new solar roof on when you're changing that roof? And you all looked into that?
Yes, we did, and so I'm going to quickly again punt it over to Jane to take the meat of the conversation. But this really aligns with our strategic plan. There's a sustainability goal within our strategic plan, and so we'll be talking a lot more about these things moving forward over the next 5 years as we implement those goals. But this is our first look at it, and I'd like to turn it over to Jane to kind of let you know what we found out.
I'm here to talk to you about solar now. We had a request when we were doing the Booker Middle School re-roof project to look at the feasibility of placing solar on the roofs there. So some key concepts I wanted to go over with you before I get into the actual report itself. School districts typically have a very low cost for power in comparison to residential and commercial accounts. School districts are not eligible for the solar tax credits like homeowners and businesses are. And so we start off our analysis at a bit of a disadvantage. But for the purposes of Booker Middle School's roof evaluation, we had the architect and the MEP engineer engage with a solar provider, Solar Source Consultants. They proposed an array of 801 modules, which would generate 332 kilowatts of DC power, which produces about 473 kilowatt hours per year. The cost of that array without bonds, oversight, IT, connection, conduit permits, because this was just the solar manufacturer's piece of the pie, was right at $1 million. That system would generate about 10 up to 20% of the total power needed for the school, which would in turn save the school district between $25,000 and $56,000 per year. And so the payback for it is 22 to 43 years based on those numbers. And the system warranties expire well before that. Typically, the equipment is about 10 years. There are some inverters that get about 12 years, and the labor and service is 1 year. So a couple of other things I wanted to make sure that you guys are aware, so when the community members are asking you, you have this information. Public schools are high-use, short-duration facilities. So what that means is we have very high occupant loads for very short periods of time and only for 180 days a year. But when those people are in our facilities, we really have to ramp up the air conditioning. So the key to energy savings is how efficient the building can be, not necessarily how it's powered. And so Sarasota County Schools uses an energy efficient system with chilled water for our HVAC, paired with ice storage, which allows us to produce the ice when the power is the cheapest and store it and use it when the power cost is the most expensive. So it is really a system that gives you significant savings now. So again, that puts us at a further disadvantage because we're doing things very well. The biggest energy waster in schools, like your home, is the building envelope, the windows, the doors, the walls, and the roof. If you have leaks, you use more energy. I have a very old house. I can stand next to my window and feel the hot air coming in. So one of the best ways to save energy is to mitigate envelope leaks. The industry recognizes this, and they have created something called energy use intensity, EUI. And you may have heard this about Neo City and Osceola. They had an EUI benchmark of 25. That is the gold standard. And what that means is it's a really airtight building, and it uses less energy. Because it uses less energy, the equipment is smaller. It makes room for more things in the same square footage. It just is a ripple effect of the good it can do. To put that into perspective, existing buildings are anywhere from 50 to 75. So I would say that the majority of our schools are somewhere in the 50 EUI range. If we set a benchmark, if your goal is, as a board, is for us to set a benchmark and make our buildings more efficient, we can use that as one of the ways to do that. So that requires very careful design, high quality construction, testing throughout the process, as well as monitoring air quality, controlling the temperature, making sure that systems are commissioned and working the way that they're supposed to. Solar arrays take up a lot of real estate, often more than just the roof areas. That's why if you just look at the roofs, generally speaking, you're probably not going to be able to power the entire facility. So maybe if solar is the goal, we look at smaller arrays for specific portions, solar arrays on certain buildings that are facing the right direction and will get us the most bang for the buck. Perhaps on a new school would be better because we could pair some solar with that increased energy efficiency of the facility. So for me, the next steps would be whatever the board's objectives are, construction services will work to accomplish them, whether that's solar or EUI or other objectives that I haven't thought about. We'll study the solar feasibility on our next new school, which will be the K-8. We could bring options to you for your consideration. And I would say that just as a general good practice, we'll work in tightening up our building envelopes without changing a lot of the costs. We do a really good job of some things. Some are kind of mandated by the Florida Building Code, but we'll do a good job of really tightening up our building envelopes. And if we do consider solar, I would urge you to add some folks in our facilities department who can maintain them because they really are unique and it's a fairly new technology, and we would want to have somebody who could service them, or we would want to make an arrangement with the solar provider that we have that service contract in place.
Thank you. Jane?
I remember about 10, 12 years ago, we looked at solar, and we were building schools at that time. We looked at solar, though, more from a standpoint of leasing that solar power. Do you remember that, Jody?
Yeah, so FPL had a program at that particular time. We were looking at roofs, and in fact, we modified our spec for what we were putting for a cap sheet on roofs. Yes.
Yeah, exactly right, but not so much for us to use. And of course, 15 years ago, no solar was being produced in Florida. You probably remember that, Jane. Here we are, this big sunshine state, right? And we're not producing any solar panels at all. And then some production in Orlando. So. And I get what you do because I know what we're doing with our chiller plants, and those are darn efficient. And of course, how do you put these wonderful solar panels on roofs, and then what happens when we want to change the skins to the roof and when we have maintenance to do on our roof so that we keep our facility tight? I think it makes sense to look at this, maybe look at the tightness of a building, as Osceola has done for future, and we have some schools on our future plan for construction. So, you know, I get it, and I know that people often ask us those questions, but I always, my retort is always, well, talk about chiller plants and how we make that ice at night, and how we run that through, and then, of course, the facilities that we have where we can see what the temperature of the water is running through the systems at all times, and we're just, to me, pretty futuristic. Still, I mean, it still looks pretty futuristic. So, I get that. I think we look to the future to do some of these things.
Thank you. Bridget?
Thank you. I really have to commend you for the cost-benefit analysis and how you just very succinctly outlined it. And I think that's really important as we evaluate, and you highlighted some of the strategies we've done early on and the benefit of it. And I hear loud and clear that you were talking direct costs would be around $1 million the time frame for it to be beneficial, and we're not even talking about the human capital and the other equipment. So moving to the Eui benchmark, and as Osceola has, how long have they had it? Do they have a time frame of where, because there's likely an investment, to your point, on the front end, and as it's reaped benefits, I'm just not sure of the historical nature when they've gone about that, and is that something that you have access to or can get, which would, I think, assist us to see if that is a strategy that we want to utilize moving forward as a kind of a case study?
I can answer some of those questions, I think. Can you hear me? Neo City was their first school to have that 25 EUI requirement. It's sold as a net zero school. It is a net zero school, but it does not have a cafeteria. It's a specialty high school, so it doesn't have a lot of the high use pieces, so they were able to go net zero. But their EUI was 25, and that's a pretty attainable goal if you already build a tight envelope. We're building now brick, which is block with an airspace and brick. That is a 50-year building, and that gives you a really good EUI if you put good windows with it, which the Florida Building Code makes you put good windows with it. And so really it's just a matter of ensuring that flashing and small details are met. I don't think at this point there's a huge cost differential in that. It's just prescribing it up front that this is what it's gonna be. And we can do some analysis for you on that. Manatee County, where I was before, was heading in that direction, and Sugg Middle School was a new school, and that was the goal. They did tests at a previous middle school to see where that previous middle school was, and they decided to build Sugg that way, and they'll test it at the end.
Bridget, Jody and I guess I was invited to participate in a energy savings thing from a League of Women, the State League of Women Voters, and they had the speaker from Osceola, and he has offered to come here and talk to us about how they're building these tight envelope buildings, and I really appreciate you, I think, was it a Zoom or a phone call? It must have been a Zoom, and it was very interesting what he was talking about. And he has said that he would come here, and Jody, anytime that you feel that he needs to, let's reach out. We'll make room for him on the schedule. Tom?
Thank you for that conversation. I was pleased to see that sustainability is on our strategic plan. So with that in mind, I don't need to be repetitive about the EUI conversation that we've already had. But Jody, you and I had a brief conversation about a governmental program. Is that the one that Jane's referring to?
I'm not sure if it's the one Jane's referring to, but FPL program is what we had talked about. So back to Jane's comment. So several years ago, we were trying to partner with FPL, and their strategy with solar at that point was on rooftops. And so we were working with them to get prepared to be able to take part in that program where they put their equipment on our roof and we leased it to them. They went away from that, and so they're building their own very large solar arrays kind of out east throughout the state of Florida. They will have coming in the near future another opportunity for us to be part of that solar array where we invest some money up front that helps them bring in some capital to build that solar array, but that pays off over time. And so that's a way for us to get involved with solar that over time pays off for us, and we don't own the equipment. So that's the program I was talking about. And we talk to FPL a couple times a year, and they've promised to let us know when that program will be open again for us to possibly take advantage of.
What I liked about that program was that we don't own the equipment, and all of that return on investment goes away because we've partnered for that. So that would be something that, from a continuous improvement model, and quite frankly, I think as we talk about a renewable source of energy, in general as a society, the same way that we use cell towers and we lease cell towers, it would seem to me that school districts and flat roofs and large footprints would be available to offer that as a way to add to our source of revenue. So I just throw that back out there. I like that we could sort of, if you will, outsource that whole thing and the maintenance of it and all the equipment. So I'd love to see us stay just real close to those kinds of conversations.
Will do.
In another area to look at, taxes don't help us because we don't pay those taxes, but, grants, and, keep watching for grants that are out there. Karen?
Yes, do you have, as a department, and Mr. Dumas, do you have a recommendation of where the board moves with this, and if there is one, any timeline therein? Obviously, there's a lot more information than what you've been able to present in this short window.
Yeah, absolutely. So our goal at this point is we will be coming back in front of you with kind of an update on the capital plan in November. A key to that conversation will be talking about the K-8 on Lorraine Road and the timing, and because we've discussed that in the last couple of years where that needs to fall. We feel very strongly that we need to get going on that building. But as we move forward, we have talked about and we'll move forward as long as we have your okay with an energy efficient, an EUI rating on that building that gets us in that area, because I think Jane is exactly right in terms of her approach. If we can do that up front, we minimize the amount of equipment we need, we minimize the tonnage that we are bringing in for AC. That absolutely, over the course of the life cycle, that building is going to save us money and reduce our carbon footprint. So that's the right direction to go. And I think as a team, that's the direction we're headed, and we'll bring that back to you when we get some design done. We take a look at it on that new K-8.
Thank you, that's important.
Jane?
And I might also mention that I brought something to Jody and to the superintendent about a carport that has a solar array on top and docking stations for 6 electric cars. And I think that has a great place to go on the STC campus, because we need to be teaching more sustainability classes to our students. And this is a great show and tell that gives you some ideas of what solar is, and we may have an opportunity to be provided that for very low or no cost. So excited about pursuing and looking at that.
Tom?
Just as an FYI, that is a Pineview grad that invented that particular contraption, and a former Sarasota crew member and a student at New College.
Well, easy to reach out to then, so we get his information to Jody. I think it's a great thing that, we're looking at ways to save energy and save our carbon footprint, reduce that. I think that's good, but to be looking at it in a cost-benefit analysis and understanding too, because, we're going to be seeing new board members are going to see, and, everyone thinks, oh, solar is cheaper, but we don't get those benefits of the upfront cost that with the tax incentives. And the chiller plant, by using that off hours, is very important. And like you said, we use the energy during the day when it's very expensive. But there's lots of other directions we can go to, and we'll put you together with that former student and crew member and current New College student, and talk about ways we can expand our energy efficiency in the district.
Yeah, absolutely. Our director of facilities, Don Hampton, reached out to them today, and so we're starting that conversation, and we'll see where that goes. Absolutely.
Great.
And if you all would like, my counterpart at Osceola County, he and I collaborate a lot. His name is Mark Clinch. If you would like, I can invite him to do a Zoom meeting with you if you want more information, if you decide you'd like to talk to him about his experiences with that EUI. And
I think maybe when we're coming up with some buildings and we're going to talk more about the EUI when you do the capital plans, that would be great. Because, I think it's not only good for us, but it's something that, the community is talking to us. And I know there was a group of students from Pineview that was, really wanting to sit down and meet with us, and then COVID all hit, and we really didn't have all of this. So, this is in reaction to that. Those students may have graduated by now, the ones who originally asked us about this. But I appreciate you following up on this, and it'll be an ongoing work that we're going to be doing. Thank you so much.
thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you. And Jody, you're the man of the hour.
Well, thank you so much. I guess we're going to talk a little bit about test kits. And so if I could have Susie DeBose come up, that'd be awesome. And I will steal a minute because I need to apologize to you. We just came out of executive session, and I didn't want this to reflect poorly on anybody. So my fault. We switched the subject matter and the timing. So Allison Foster, Dr. Foster, and Mitzi were scheduled for 1 o'clock. And that scheduling mess up was mine. We were supposed to go opposite with that. So I didn't want it to reflect poorly on them. They were ready to go, and we did it early. So that's my fault. I apologize to you. With that, we are here to talk a little bit about our test kits. And so let me start off with that. So we have, both Susie and I work very closely with Michael. In fact, Susie has gotten off the phone with him as late as sometime today. We are still waiting on our test kits to arrive in Sarasota County. Michael has got information that, Mr. Drennan, that they will be in county today sometime. Again, to review, we've got test kits coming in from the state for both students and staff. Which our intent would be to put them in the clinics at each site and then distribute them when we needed to. And along with handing a kit to students when they're sick, when they go home, kind of informative sheet for parents to take them through. Here's what the kit's for. Here's what to watch for symptoms. Here's when you can return to school based on your symptoms. So that for students, and then certainly an informational packet for employees, because all of our employees are essential employees. They can remain at work unless they're symptomatic. And this test kit will help them to determine, certainly on day 5, which is what the health department would like us to do, have them test, even if they're asymptomatic on day 5, to see if they test positive or negative. So we'll work with employees to make sure they understand that process. Apologize it's taken this long, but we just have not gotten the kits in town yet. So that's kind of a quick little update. And Susie, I don't know if you had anything beyond that on the test kits themselves.
I'll just add that DOH is expecting 10,000 kits, and they'd like to share them with a number of their community partners. So Chuck Henry will be giving some to Northport, City of Northport, to the schools, to the charter schools. There'll be plenty, sufficient enough. And as Jody said, if students are sick on campus, we can send them home. Or if they're off campus and something happens over the weekend or overnight, they can drive up to the school and pick one up from us rather than go to the pharmacy. So that will be helpful. And the test for the staff is a rapid PCR. So within 20 minutes versus 24 to 48 hours. So those will be very helpful. And I'm just happy the numbers have gone down sufficiently, because I can tell you, and I'm not even afraid, I'm not gonna knock on anything, but yeah, Michael shared that our worst 7-day average was on August 26th. We had 144 pediatric cases for an overall number in the community. Remember, we were saying 400. It was 440 cases. As of today, which is over the last 7 days, 10 cases in our pediatric population and 93 overall in the community. So, good news.
And we are still posting the daily rate, the 7-day average, and the 14 average to our website. My apologies, it was not easily accessible earlier today, but that will be corrected, so it'll be in its normal spot. You can click on it and see it. And again, we are getting those daily, and we'll continue to update as we need to on our website.
Bridget.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Dumas, for addressing that question. I know that was raised, but Ms. DuBose, you're very rarely up here, but I want to say thank you, because I know you have worked to an an incredible level. So I just wanted to take this opportunity
Does
and
it
say
show?
thank you very much for everything you and your staff have done.
From the contact tracing team to the school teams, the nursing teams, the nurses have really contributed a lot. So, and with all of your support, so it takes a village. Just happy that we can take a breath.
Jane?
I just want to say, and masks do help. I do think that our mask mandate did help us to go down as quickly as we have. It's really been a remarkable thing. And thank you for your hard work, Susie, because I know how hard you work. See, your hair even sparkles from all of your hard
I was
work.
hoping for the fairy powers,
I'm going to
but
start calling you
that's the best
Twinkle.
I could do.
Twinkle.
Yeah.
But thank you, and thank your, the staff and all those people that are working on contact tracing and the other things that they're doing for our kids, because I think it's remarkable. And I'm very happy to know that, our kids and our staff are much safer today than they were at the end of August.
I have a clarification on the test. We've got a rapid PCR test for staff, and those are the ones that were contact traced, but they're essential workers for their coming back. Are we requiring a test, or we're just hoping they'll give us a negative test, or?
So technically, yes, we are requiring a test because that's what the Department of Health has given us in terms of the guidance to make sure we can deem them essentially essential workers, right? And so, yes, when somebody is involved in a contact tracing event, they'll be given the parameters that you stay at work as long as you're asymptomatic. That's what we're doing now. But on day 5, you need to take this test. Now, having said that, we're not going to be there with them taking the test. So we're going to give it to them. We're going to give them the parameters. They're going to take it home and report back if they are hopefully not positive on day 5. Well, they'll be reporting on day 6 because they take it on day 5. So yes, we will explain it. We'll give it to them. It'll be a requirement because it's a requirement of being able to deem them operationally essential.
Well, I would think they would want to have this test to make sure. What if we have flu's coming? What if we have, staff with symptoms that might be COVID, might be flu? Will they have access to these tests too?
Yes, symptomatic staff will have access to the test.
And what about for the students? I mean, when the students are quarantined now, are we sending a letter home? These are the symptoms to watch for. Here's a test in 5 days, or?
So we are not, but we are transitioning in that direction. One of the other things we've been working on, and we know has been a real problem for the schools, is the workload associated with the contact tracing. So Susie has been working really hard to beef her team up so that we take everything off a school site. And so the only thing down the road a school will be doing with contact tracing is developing the initial contact list. Then we'll take everything from there, including that parent contact. As we take that over, we certainly can ensure that our contact tracing teams are delivering that message and that information to the parents regarding what all that looks like. So we're working in that direction, and certainly this little breath has allowed us to group and get that ramped up. And so we are starting a couple of pilot schools where we take some of that on, but we'll be moving in that direction. Again, I think the breather has helped us a little bit that we're not having 300 cases a day to kind of try and contact trace. So we'll be ready. We'll be able to take that off the school sites as soon as possible, and then if we end up with another variant where that ramps back up, we'll be in good shape for that. So that's where we are.
I'm still concerned about the students coming back that would have been quarantined. Do we have any numbers, either us or the county, on the number of students that were quarantined that tested positive?
Even Michael is not able to produce those numbers.
There's nobody who's been checking that
since the start of the pandemic. It's a challenge because we put the contacts in. In fact, we have to get with George Goodfellow and James Ferrara. We're putting those students that choose, or families that choose not to quarantine, they're continuing to go to school, they're asymptomatic, in the dashboard. We want everybody in the dashboard so we know who was in contact. Now, if at some point they pop positive, there is probably some way, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, to say that child had a contact day and a return date of the same date, so that means they didn't go out, and now they're positive. So that's something we need to explore with.
It's not an easy thing to get you where we can push a button and say we got it, and the health department doesn't have it either. So we can probably get you something, but it's going to be digging through our database. We didn't design it to do what you're asking to do. So our guys are awesome in IT, can probably get something out of it, but it's not an easy thing for us to just get to.
It started, but now that things are calmer, because I think that's something that I know a lot of the parents that have contacted me are concerned about. You know, so now we no longer have masks, but now we have kids that would have been quarantined that are susceptible to getting it. And I know that not every child that was quarantined got it, not even half. I mean, maybe 10%, and I'm just throwing a number out there that I'm pulling out of thin air because I have no way of knowing how many kids that were quarantined ended up testing positive, except that we know there was a lot more. And you know, I don't know, you know, maybe we could throw 10% out there, but now I think now that we actually have smaller numbers that we can watch, I mean, maybe, you know, if the schools can get back to us and tell us, well, this is a kid that was quarantined. Now we've got 3 kids in my class that have symptoms. I mean, because I will be watching, and I am so glad. I mean, we were up over 200, then we were down to 100 a day, and we're under 50 a day now, which is wonderful. And, you know, I think a lot of those days we're under 20, and I hope we stay that way. You know, because I think if we jump up again and start going to the 50 to 100 a day, I'm going to say, why? What school is that? What's happening in that school? And what can we do to mitigate it? I'm not saying we bring back face masks for everybody, because I don't think we'll get up to the 10% positivity. But I think we need to be very specific in what kinds of mitigations that we take. I mean, even if, you know, we do something like, okay, we can't keep everybody 6 feet apart in the class. Oh, but now that Johnny is home with COVID, you know, Bob and Mary and Susie that were sitting at the little table, they're back in school, but maybe we can move their table 6 feet away from the other kids. Or even ask Bobby, Susie, and Mary's mom, you want to put a mask on this week? You know, some of those things, because I think that we need to look at that. But again, we need to see, are the kids that are quarantined getting positive later? And we need to watch that to see what kinds of actions we need to take. Because again, just masking everybody, I don't think is the answer right now. We need to be very specific in what we do. And we can watch it. We can see when it starts.
Absolutely, point well taken, and we will work with our IT team to see what we can dig out of our current system to do some of that analysis, and certainly principal input in terms of what they're seeing on campus, or our contacts at the school site, what they're seeing on campuses. Susie and her team will absolutely make sure we're having those conversations, and if we have an issue at a site, we'll certainly try to address that systematically. And we will work towards trying to dig that out of the system. Like I said, it's just not because we didn't design it to do that. We've got to kind of think it through, and how can we get.
Well, yeah, let's do it while we've got some breathing room, so that if another wave comes by, we'll have more information, we'll have better information, and we'll have a better understanding about the correlation between kids who were quarantined versus kids who tested positive. Because, you know, it's a very frustrating thing for the teachers, the students, the parents, all of us. And if we're quarantining these kids that don't need to be quarantined, you know, we should know about it. Or if we should be quarantining kids that we're now letting back, we need to know about that too. Thank you. Bridget.
Yeah, do you have the current single-day average for yesterday, the 7-day and 14-day?
So for 10-4, the single day was 2.88%.
What was that?
2.88. 2.88. The 7-day is 4.34, and the 14-day is 5.16.
Thank you.
But again, the numbers that I look at are the numbers in our schools. And on Tuesdays, it said we had, well, I don't know if we have every number in there, but we had 8, 2 in elementary, 2 in middle, and 4 in high, and 1 staff. And Monday, we had 27, 3 elementary, 8 middle, 12 high school, and 3 in the staff. But you know, Friday we had none. Thursday we had 5. week ago Wednesday, it was 11. A week ago Tuesday, it was 6. Those are the numbers that I'm looking at, even more than the positivity rate. You know, I want to look at these numbers, and I want to keep them down below 20 a day.
So do we. So do we. I mean, coming out of the weekends, Susie would take a look at the list on Monday over the last, month or so, and Susie, we'd be looking at how many coming out of the weekends. Yeah, several hundred cases. And so, yeah, absolutely. We continue to monitor that. We watch this very closely. And we're just, as Susie said, we're very thankful to get a little bit of a breather here with very low numbers so we can regroup. Because, again, the other thing I would say is that everybody who's involved in contact tracing, they have a primary job, too. Like, Susie needs to run the nursing programs around the district. And so the good thing about that is she's been able to focus on that the last couple of days. So, so I think welcome breather for everybody. But we will absolutely pay attention, look to make those modifications and see if we can determine, that between quarantines, are we picking up positives in school sites because of the quarantines and the relationship in class. So we'll do that.
Are we offering the test to the students who are quarantined either in school or at home?
Not unless they're symptomatic at this point, because there's no need to quarantine. So really, we're focusing on the asymptomatic versus symptomatic student, and that's going to be the focus. We've got, I think, originally we asked Michael for 2,000 of those a week, and I don't know, he got a bulk all at one time. So we're going to have to look at the first few weeks as we start to use these things. How many can we get? How many does he have? And how many do we need? So we'll, over the next couple of weeks, if we do get them in today, we'll work all that kind of numbers out and how we get it distributed, and hopefully be a little better maybe next month to come back and say it's running. Here's where we are, and here's who we're testing with. These things.
And then the testing is one of the mitigation things that the CDC says you should do. You should test, so we should be ahead of it. We should know if it's coming. We'll see if another wave is coming if we're testing our kids, and we know. If we're not testing our kids, if we're
that's the other thing I would
tested.
Yeah, that's the other thing I would say too is our approach to this and working is certainly direction of the board and in partnership with the Department of Health is it's all voluntary, right? So we'll have it available for parents if they'd like to, but we're not really forcing a test. We're not doing any testing at school of students. I think that's important to note.
Thank you. Well, you're dismissed, Jody.
No, you didn't even finish the list. Did you finish that list?
What list? The mitigation list?
No, I wanted.
Oh, no, I didn't see. Oh, I'm sorry. Jane says she was on the list.
Yeah, I just wanted to say one thing about this. I gave the copy of this to, I think, Dan and to you, Jody, and to the superintendent. I'd like to submit a copy of this to all the board members, but it's from Indian River County, and it is a tiered mitigation strategy for COVID-19. While we're in a little bit of a breather, maybe we need to look at this because it doesn't talk just about the horrible M words of mandate and masks, which I guess have become a word we shouldn't use in the state. But at any event, there are a lot of other things that are listed here, and this on our website might be really informative to hand out. I think it's a good job. It goes from 1% to 5%. We all know that 3% really is kind of the sweet spot, although have gone up to 8 and then to 10, but basically I think this is a great visual in one page. I also have it in Spanish, but I think it would be great if we could look at something like this while we're in this position.
Brennan, Dr. Assman, yesterday when we were meeting, you had a sheet, the Excel spreadsheet that showed the positivity rate for all the counties in the district. And whereas all the counties went down, the counties with face mask mandates were all down below 10%. And there was a few other counties that were, they were down single digits, and there were a few other counties that were in the 9% range. And I think one small county was below 10%, but the ones that were below 10%, except for those 9% ones, were mask mandates. So I'm glad we are to 2%. That's a great thing that we're doing, and I think it showed that it worked. You guys are working, and hopefully we can think of some plans to do if we have to, if we see one coming. Again, we'll have better ideas on what we're supposed to do. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
The next thing, we were looking at policies, and after you sent the information to me on the policy thing that you went to, it was not the same policy class that I went to 10 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever it was. And I kind of wish I'd gone to your class too, because it was a new, updated class. And I don't know, maybe you could briefly go through it or point out some of the things you learned. This was, and this is what FSBA does about what you need to know about writing policies and what you should do about it. What were some of the highlights that you saw?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I made sure that everybody had a copy of that, and I would think there's a lot of detailed information that we certainly don't need to go over in this part of the workshop, but I think it's worth reading. There's criteria about how to write policy, what makes good policy. So I'm just going to but what I got out of the class more than those things, which I think are important, and all of that you all have copies of it, is as we're discussing the Neola proposal, it was really pertinent information for me to sort of have a big overview of all of our policies. And then as we begin to write policy and deal with policy and work with policy on an ongoing basis, I've run into some things that have just honestly haven't been clear, and I know I've had those conversations with Dr. Asplin that we're not quite sure what that means. So that's reflective, and Dan DeLeo put out a sheet at our last board meeting or last workshop about how many of the policies haven't been updated since we transitioned our law firm. So it's a kind of a housekeeping item that is unfortunate and detailed and requires our attention on an ongoing basis. And as I can see from today's conversation or just this class, we're a little bit behind the 8 ball there. But I just highlighted some things I'm going to go through quickly. I mean, obviously, our policies should be crystal clear. What is board policy? It's on page 16. The two things that stood out for me were the statements that are reflecting of our principles that guide the staff as they carry out their duties, chart a course for the superintendent, and define the limits within which he or she can exercise good judgment. Those are the kinds of things that I think when we're writing policy or we're working with policy that we don't automatically gravitate to. We're always trying to figure out what does that mean, or what is the task that we need to perform, as opposed to really taking a step back and examining policy. Also, one other thing that the purposes of policy, which is on page 19, I think that's another good place to really step and review. I highlight 2 of the 5. It provides continuity. As I've mentioned before when we were talking about Neola last week or 2 weeks ago, we have elections coming up next year where 2 of our board members are not rerunning. So continuity and policy is that piece that really keeps us together. Number 5 was a part of our conversation that we did have when we were discussing Neola the last time, and I thought this was important. Policies keep the focus on student learning and the learning environment. So those are just things that I highlighted. Lastly, which I think I'll mention again when we're talking about Neola, I wrote this down because I just thought it's an important piece. How does policy move the strategic plan forward? So I think that while we have this strategic plan before us, that's a question that we should be asking ourselves on an ongoing basis as it relates to the implementation of the strategic plan, and to benchmark it, to make sure our policies are supporting it. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But all of that information, I think, is worth a read over when you have a chance.
I found too that, page 18, where policies aren't neutral, they either mitigate, exasperate, perpetuate, or eliminate something. And another page that I thought was interesting was 52, discussing and deciding on substantive policies and what our board responsibilities are, to sift through the information and determine how the policies will help achieve the goals and how important it is, and also getting input from the public, and which I think we did last board meeting when we talked about it at the workshop, and then we heard from the public what they thought about it at the meeting, and then now we're going to be workshopping it again, which I believe is, when it's something that's going to be affecting them, it is something like that. And also in here, there were a few lessons that you all did where you went and found different policies, and I think those would be little exercises that the rest of the board might want to do to get a look in at our policies and see how they affect it and whatnot. So I appreciate you doing that. And now we will talk about the policy on public participation at board meetings. I took the policy, some of the information on the one policy that Jane brought in, was it Broward and Palm Beach, or Lee County, and we had the one from Manatee County, and we had ours, and I also listened to what the public was saying, and we kind of put them together, added a few things, because what none of the other ones had was the public comment section that we have, where they can send something in on public comments, and I clarified that this is under 5A, that for purposes of public participation, they can email us through this public comments thing, and those things will be posted on the minutes. But if they want to contact board members and not want it part of the minutes, they can just send us all through the school board email or to individual board members, so that there's those other ways of reaching out to the school board members to let them know that they don't have to come to a meeting to talk about it. I also put some information in there, and I don't know if it was necessarily useful, but that if it is not a place to attack, and this is something that I think was in other ones, it's not a place to attack staff at a board meeting, but told them what they should do, like contact the administration or the superintendent if they want to complain about a staff member, because the staff member wouldn't be here, and it's only one-sided. Does anyone else have any comments on what we talked about? Because what is here is the language still says up to 3 minutes. We did not change that at all. Karen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It looks like there's a differentiation in the comments directed towards agenda items to be voted on and general comments, but the actual policy here I did not see. Are those separated? Are they at the same time? Is this looking at moving things to the end of the meeting, the televised piece?
I did not say whether they were televised or not, but I just assumed that there would be before the meeting and at the end of the meeting. We didn't say that basically we'd close the meeting and then have comments. My intention was that you would be able to speak on agenda items or general comment items after we've done with the voting, and the general comment items will still be aired according to this.
And as far as judgment calls on the appropriateness of what anyone's saying, that would be the chair that would be making those judgment calls?
I'm sorry. Yes, they were talking about, some people were talking about hiring a parliamentarian, but I think a parliamentarian is more for Robert's rules. Sergeant at Arms, our law enforcement is there right now, and then I've talked with Tim about that. And he says, yes, he does serve as sergeant at arms right now. And I did put some language in there that if there was somebody that is aggressive, that they could come in without any other warning. And this one, it's the warning. It's sort of kind of what we did last meeting. I think they have to cause disorder to be removed or use profane language. Like there was one man that swore a few times. Yeah, he should go. But I think I called the person one time and there was still some things going on. But I think if it settles down within 15, 30 seconds, you can't call that disorder. Because if things have settled down before the next person comes up to speak, unless somebody's out there screaming and yelling, definitely. I mean, I think we should be a little more careful with what we do.
I just want to reiterate that I think it's obvious that there's a deeply embedded division, which is having, in my perception, an impact in a multitude of ways in our schools and amongst our families. And I don't support making changes in the midst of that. I would like our focus to be uniting this community. I'm not opposed to change. I'm just opposed to it in the midst of a deep divide. I think there's a lot of opportunity for it to be interpreted in ways that are in contrast to uniting us. Thank you.
Can you tell me which sections you think are the divisive ones that would be causing a problem that are different than what we're doing now?
I can talk about sections and perceived divisions and perceived biases on how different things are handled, and those are all a matter of perception, which I don't think are as important right now as having a focus that unites our community and staying away from change that can be ill-perceived with a already deep divide. So it's not a matter of me nitpicking changes. I think change is inevitable, but I think the timing of change is important to that change having the highest probability of success. And my priority is coming up with initiatives that unite our community.
Well, I know there's a lot of in our community that are afraid to come to board meetings right now, and I think we need to open the board meetings to everyone, not just one side. And I think if we want to unite our community, we need to be careful when we go on programs and, ask members of the public to come and speak up to their board members, and encourage them to come. I know that when we had the LGBT, the transgender issues, and we had the Black Lives Matter issues, I talked with some of those groups that were coming, that were out there, and said, there's nothing on the agenda for this right now. There's nothing on our agenda. And if you keep coming here, it's just causing more fuel to the fire. So please don't come, rather than saying, well, we've got to keep CRT out of our classrooms, and you need to come and speak up to our school boards. I mean, those are two different messages, and I think that that's something that we can all take responsibility for.
Well, I don't think that what I perceive to be finger pointing is as productive as being accountable for each of us being accountable for our own behavior. And I actually see those comments as divisive. There's any amount of finger pointing that could go on based on perception, and I see it in contrast to a united front, and a strong believer in holding yourself accountable being the biggest step towards a united, successful board.
Thank you. Mr. Edwards.
So in that class, the policy class, I learned one of the questions that you would ask, what is the purpose of the policy? So I'm going to start there, and I want to reiterate what I've said at our last meeting and just back it up. The purpose of changing the public comment section is that I perceive in my short stay on the board or my short tenure on the board that we've gone from board business to political rallies. And what I would like to, the purpose for me of addressing the public comment section is twofold. I have learned a lot from public comments when we're less than, I would say probably less than 20 people. And those folks have 3 minutes, and they've come into our boardroom, and they've spoken their piece. And often I've seen someone from administration or the superintendent, could you please follow up with that person out in the hallway? And I want to preserve that. I absolutely, positively do not want to see that go away. I don't want to see our public, who are our stakeholders with kids and family members and frankly taxpayers who are so concerned about our education. I don't want to see that go away, and I want to preserve it. So that's one part of the policy that's important to me. The second thing is, though, that I've seen political rallies that have been brought in here through, frankly, a political activist group that was started by a fellow board member. Moms for Liberty is a political activist group. They attended all of our town halls. They pretty much consumed a lot of the airtime at our town halls. And I've seen them go from Black Lives Matter to CRT to the mask policy to what I heard last week, which really, or the last 2 weeks, that started to scare me, is that if we mention social emotional learning or we talk about diversity in any way, shape, or form, it's automatically CRT. So I feel that that political rally that disrupts our boardroom is not designed for that. And so the separation of those public, I don't even want to take those folks' public ability to speak to the board away. I don't want to silence anyone, but I want to preserve the public comments that matter, that really care, that are part of the day-to-day of our district. And if you want to have a political rally, have it at the end of the meeting. And based upon the amount of people that show up, you could have as much as 3 minutes, but if it's a group of people wanting to have a political rally, you get limited to a minute, to a maximum of an hour. Everyone gets to be heard. You can do whatever, yell, scream, all of that should not 100% change in any way, shape, or form. But to me, that I want to preserve the boardroom for doing the board's business and the business of the school district and hear from those people, not entertain a political rally. So and I thought I said that in our last workshop, and I'll say it again, but that policy that we have here does not reflect that. And so there are a couple things. It doesn't show me where those two groups are defined, what is the definition of group one, what is the definition of group two, and that public comments card needs to match. So all of those kinds of things are things I learned at the class. So we want to be clear, we want to be precise, and we want to make sure we're dotting every I and crossing every T where possible.
Tom, I have two questions for you. One is the public comments cards have to match, but we have to get this passed first before we change the cards. But you wanted something else described in here to separate the one group from the next?
Yeah, it's not, that part of it is not clear to me.
What is it you wanted clarified?
I think that you should talk that, as it says, that group one will be at this stage of the meeting, and it's part of the board business, and it relates to the agenda, and it's very clear that it spells it out, and that any other issues, I just didn't feel, maybe it's me, but I didn't feel that either one of those groups were defined well enough, and where they are positioned in the school board meeting agenda. So in other words, we know now where public comments always are, and now we're adding a public comment section. I'd like to know where that's inserted in the actual school board agenda. That's not clear. And frankly, I think that you can pass the card and the policy at exactly the same time. I think they should be connected, but that's just me.
I guess so we should have.
One last thing, it does, everybody still gets 3 minutes, and I'm not sure that it should. The second group should be defined by the quantity of the people and what its agenda really is, and a set time. I think Lee County has it set for an hour, and to a maximum of, to a minimum of a minute, but you can have more time if it's less people.
Under 6A, it says that they said, are they going to speak for an agenda item or general comments? We could look at changing that more, but some of it is getting down to some of the procedures. It'll start showing up on our board agenda, agenda comments, general comments, and that'll show up on the agenda. It may be on this agenda, but we'll have agenda comments before we vote, and general comments will be after we vote. And I could clarify that better in that if you would like. But at this time, I don't want to define, this is where comments go. I'm listening from what I was hearing from before, and also what Ms. Rose was saying, that we have to be careful that we don't make it look like it's reactive. We want to get after somebody. Or change a policy for one particular problem. I don't want to. What I don't want to do is have people protesting that we're picking on them, or we're trying to shut them down in any way. I think in the past, when we've had 30 people coming to talk on one thing, as chair, I asked the board to consider reducing the time to 2 minutes and got a consensus from the board. That's why we say up to 3 minutes. But I think it would be something that maybe as a board we'd have to agree on. I'd have some concerns about reducing that time right now. There was an editorial in the paper about it, and we heard people commenting about it.
I'm happy to respond to that, but I don't want to, I get frustrated when new board members, so if any other board members need to chime in, but I do want to respond, so I'm happy to.
Bridget Ziegler is next, but do you want Tom to respond now or until you're done?
No, let him finish his thoughts. I'll be happy to wait.
So I did take a lot of what you just said into consideration, because I'm certainly not wanting, I'm in agreement with Karen Rose that we're looking for ways to unify. And that's why I want to make sure that people hear that I'm looking to preserve what's working and to minimize what's disruptive and a problem. But in conjunction to what you just said, not wanting to change anything, I've had a lot of people tell me that, oh, this comes and goes. We've had situations in the school district where a bunch of people come in angry and carry on, and then it simmers down and it will change. I will tell you, I think that train has left the station, and here's why. I think the introduction of Moms for Liberty has created a political environment, and people know that they can use the school board room for that environment. And also, honestly, another school board member, same Mrs. Ziegler, wants conservative, wants partisan, wants people to run, and wants to change that, which will further invite political rallies to come into the boardroom. And I am adamantly opposed to that. And so while we're having this conversation and try to head all of those kinds of things off at the pass, I think we want to create an environment for school board business, district business, curriculum, instruction, achievement gap, strategic plan, all of those kinds of things should be front and center, and that the political rally conversations that would continue to the best of my knowledge. Plus, we have 20 to 25% of the school districts in the state of Florida are already having the same conversation because of the same behaviors across the state.
It's across the country.
And it is, and we've had the National School Board Association petition the federal government for protection against domestic terrorism. If those statistics don't tell you that the paradigm has shifted, this isn't going to simmer down. This isn't going to go away. This is the policy this is why I think we need to have a policy that the paradigm shifted, and we have to, as a school board, find ways to make sure that the business of the school district is handled, dealt with, and not to minimize anyone's freedom of speech. They can speak at the end of the meeting if they would like to.
So I'll take it that we should be looking at some changes to, it'd be 6A and B to maybe clarify some language in there. But I want to caution you also that we're asking the public not to use names. And I think we should be careful also about not using names and pointing out certain groups because I don't think it's necessary, perhaps, but I think we all to probably practice some of what we preach also. But I am going to take your comments into consideration, and I think we will pull it from the agenda, make those changes, get them to you, all of you, and see if there's something we can put on the next workshop and to be voted on at the next agenda. Bridget.
Thank you. Well, lots to unpack here, but I will start where I first started, which was what I had said last time, was this policy is meaningless unless it's executed consistently. And that never happens. And ironically, Mr. Edwards, to respond to so much of what you said, you say, what's the purpose? Yet you go through and identify basically who you want to say what and cannot say. And that is not our job. Whether or not people want to come, whether they're a part of whatever group, that is their right to petition their government. There are parents, and if you were one, you may understand a little better, that are frustrated. And you are disparaging them at every opportunity. So, and I don't make attacks to my fellow board members, but I will not be your doormat. Like, not happening.
But we have to be careful. They're not all parents that are coming.
Excuse me. I sat and let him sit there and say what he wants to say. I will respond.
Excuse me. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's frustrating that you can go on this whole element to say that this is all political theater and totally discount that there are people who are frustrated. That is what makes them frustrated. You keep doing it, doubling down. And then to say that we don't want political items, but you are going to read a proclamation today that half the people in this community probably would think was a bit political. And I think you're being a hypocrite. And I think it needs to be called out. Now, going back to the business of the board, I believe with Mrs. Rose, and you just certified it, what's the purpose? It's to shut people down and control who can say what based on what you agree with. I mean, you added some fluffy words in there, but that is very loud and clear. And so in an opportunity to simmer down, we should leave it as it is. I've always agreed, and Mrs. Goodwin would know that and knows this, about separating it out. But you have just trampled that completely. And my other concern was the ability to be consistent of when it was on the agenda or when it wasn't. And so I'm going to back what Mrs. Rose said. And I think it's a real disservice to say what you just said. I can take it, and I would never shut you down. But don't say you want to work together and do all these things when you say one thing and you act another. With it, that's all.
Jane Goodwin.
Okay. Thank you all for all of your comments. How's that? Does that sound nice? And I've got a smile on my face. I'm worried about you because I think you've taken really, to me, more of a bylaw. But in the hope of squelching problems right now that exist at this board table and in the community, I'm going to say let's table it. Let's go away from this. Let's not look at this right now. Let's come back to it later in the fall maybe, or after. If we get a Neola contract, which I'm hoping we will do, I'm very much in support of that. I think we need to do that. And look at all of our procedures at that time, our policies, our bylaws. Bylaws are really more the procedures, at least in the way that Neola does things, and our policies. So I'm going to say, let's table it. Let's not, I don't mean really table it. I mean, let's wait and look at it later.
Brennan, I'm going to ask you to, we talked about the Neola contract, and it turns out that it doesn't need a board approval. The superintendent can choose that. I mean, it's under the $50,000 a year, so I checked it, but we thought that it was something that we should be working on together and getting support of. You've had some more thoughts on that. Could you share some of those thoughts?
Yes, did you want to do that now, or it's the next item on the list?
It's
okay
all
now.
the same discussion.
Okay. All right.
Because if Jane says we should do this, wait until Neola comes in, I think we need to know that we probably aren't bringing Neola in the next few months.
Well, here's what I've found, and I think what we should do. First of all, those 48 or 50 policies that came in recently, what I found was those were strike-throughs coming from NEFEC, and they also included I guess the clear language without the strike-throughs as well, so that we can move forward with those policies. I did call NEFEC, and they told me that our contract with them is $4,000 a year, and they update or revise certain policies twice a year, depending on the legislative changes and so on and so forth. I talked to Dan today because I wanted to find out, what does this mean as far as our staff and as far as our attorney is concerned and the work behind all of that. And in our conversations, we had two different conversations. Number one, those 48 or 50 policies that were changed due to the legislative session, those need to be placed into our policies as soon as possible because they are enacted right now. At the same time, we have around 400 policies in our school district that need to be looked at because there are some revisions that need to be made, and I know Dan has seen some of them as well that maybe should have been made a few years ago and so on and so forth. But we do need to go back and look at all 400 of them. Now, is that going to be Neola or is that going to be NEFEC? So what I'm trying to do is talk to NEFEC and say, look, if you were going to revise or look at all 400 of our policies, what does that mean? What does that look like? What would the contract look like? How much it would be? Neola, we know what that would be. We've already talked to Tom Young about that, and we have that information. So the reason I'm saying to do that is just so that I can give you, the board, an opportunity to say, okay, we have these two separate companies. They both have to look at all 400 of our policies. Here's the cost for one, here's the cost of the other, and here's the amount of work that's going to be involved in that so that we can make a good decision.
The amount of work for us.
Well, and the amount of work for us, is that going to be more for one company or less for another, or is it going to be the same amount of work for for either company? And then what is the cost between the companies, and then how good are they? And I know, Dan, you said Neola is the gold standard, and so I just want to make sure that we have all that information in front of you before we just pull the trigger on either one of the companies. The NEFEC is sending me all that information today, and I will have that. So I'll be able to share that. I could even share that in our next one-on-one so you have an idea. Or it might be very clear when I get that information that either they are not the ones or they are, and then I can have that conversation with you as board members. I know Tom Young was in here before. I've worked with Tom Many times, even in my other school district, he's fantastic. He's an attorney, and he works for Neola, and he works through policies, as he has said. And he also is an arbitrator and has worked through impasse and negotiations. He's done a lot of work in a lot of different areas in the school district. So I really trust him. I think he does a lot of great work. But I still felt, when I found the information that I found this week, I felt like we still needed to just make sure that we're looking at both companies and make sure we make a good decision. That's all.
I want to respond to a couple of the other comments that were made. And one of them is finger pointing. Finger pointing isn't only going one way. When someone says they have to be handled, I forgot what, but the same way across the board. That's sort of finger pointing at the chair or whoever else is running the meeting. I mean, so we've got finger pointing going all over. But it is not meant to shut down, and there's nothing in here that does anything to shut down public comment. In fact, it gives way, opens up ways to comment to the board. There are people who are afraid to come to a board meeting and give their comments. We can't speak to just one group or two groups that are in here, and it's frustrating to me that we have people speaking here that sometimes don't live in our county, and many of them don't have children in our county. But some that do have children in our county, they've been here, they've talked, we've heard them, and what is frustrating to me is those people in our community that have children, they want to be heard and are afraid to be heard. We need to clarify our policy to say this is what we need to do. And we need to, and there was one sentence in, I don't know how many of you read this whole thing, but there was one that says that, if there is somebody acting in an aggressive way, law enforcement can step in without the chair calling them out. The chair has to, and this is what the state law says, the chair should give warning, and then someone can be removed. But we saw last week, we had 2 or 3 people using foul language at the podium. We had people using it in the audience to speakers while they were speaking. We had foul gestures being made. And we now have, I'm not sure if it was the Proud Boys, but the boy with the man with the speaker at my house last night, he had a Proud Boys t-shirt on. And I know they stormed the Capitol with guns. I don't know what they're going to do here. I know they've stormed the Broward County School District. I know they've protested outside Manatee County School Board members' homes. Mm-hmm. We need to cut the rhetoric. And if there's anything that anyone at this board table can do to reduce that rhetoric, I urge you to please do that. And do not continue to add flames or fuel to the fire. We need to be working as a school district looking at what we need to do for the kids, not what we need to do for political activism. And I think that this that we're looking at right now, and I will come back and I'll clarify the difference between where the agenda items and the general items come back. Okay, we'll clarify that more. It wasn't clarified in the other ones, but I can see why we might want to clarify that. We'll do that, and we'll make sure that that happens. It'll be out there. We'll hear some more comments from the public again today on it. But, I think even around the corner remarks can be finger pointing also. So I think we need to be careful about what we say and look at what we are trying to accomplish, which is the orderly school board meetings so that the public can come, not just some. Mr. Edwards.
So I just want to circle back to say that I did not attack you, Mrs. Ziegler. I talked about your behaviors. I did not call you a name. You called me a hypocrite. You made a cheap shot at the fact that I'm not a parent, but I don't think that's a cheap shot because I care for this school district and I care for the children's education. And I will tell you point blank that I have worked very hard to be a voice of reason and a middle ground to the divisive behavior that I think you incite. I think you incite part of this divisiveness that walks into, maybe you don't mean to, but I'm talking about your behaviors and comments that I've heard you say in the newspaper and in interviews, particularly in around partisan issues. And again, I described behaviors, not call you a name. So when I introduced the metric for 8% that was modified to 10%, I felt that was a middle ground. And you have no idea how many times I have spoken personally to people that oppose the mask policy who thanked me and said, listen, I don't like the mask policy. I don't want my child masked. And frankly, I'm not from your party, but I appreciate what you have done to find the middle ground. And so to back up what Mrs. Brown said, the policy that I'm presenting is not to shut anyone down, whether I agree with them or not. And that I never said I want to put the people in the back of the meeting that I disagree with. I never said that. What I said was everybody needs to be heard. And the middle ground that I see in order to keep politics alive, if that's where we're headed, and I think that's a mistake, but the way is to preserve those 3 minutes for agenda items for the stakeholders that are trying desperately to let us, and I appreciate people's frustrations with the mask policy, whether they're a parent or not, but and I've spoken and have had those conversations. I'm just trying to find that middle ground that makes everyone heard and keeps the sanity of running a school district in place. So I apologize if I ruffled your feathers and you felt the need to call me a hypocrite, but I did not attack you. I discussed the behaviors that are leading up to the problems that we're experiencing and why I want the policy to be modified.
Thank you. I want to point out to people that may be watching this at home, we are in a workshop mode right now. Normally, we would be sitting down there and it'd be more casual. The workshop mode is where we express our positions on things. These are not necessarily the same kind of positions we would want to discuss at a board table. But I think open discussion is what we need at the workshop so that we can get a consensus on where we're going. Those that are at home, we are workshopping this now. So some of the discussion is probably a little more heightened than what it would be at a board table. Ms. Goodwin.
Well, I just want to go back to Neola for a minute.
Okay.
Dr. Asplin. Let's do a little giddy up on this. We made to make a decision on this sooner rather than later. We have a tendency of pushing things off a little later than I like, but I don't think that the apples are. We're comparing apples to apples with NEFEC and Neola, and you have to understand that the money that it costs us for Neola includes a lot of hours of Tom Young's and other lawyers to come in and help us with this. And I think we need to do this. And I think best case from what I have heard, I don't know anybody except little tiny districts that use NEFEC. And I don't know, I never knew we were even using them. That's how important they were. But I just would like to see us get going with this because I think we are a day late and a dollar short, and I would like to see us do that. I I really liked the policy that I put together. And I'm sorry that it didn't fly, but it was penciled out specifics of things that we could do with public comment that would keep hear everyone, but keep the guardrails on this public comment portion, which is really important, but not the most important part of our board meeting. So, I just think maybe we need to put it down and bring it back up again. Shirley. I know
so,
that you work
I'm-
hard, and I appreciate all you do. I know you've been working extremely hard for months as this, and don't you think that I don't notice it? But I hate the daggers and the things that are being.
I would like comments on this given to Kathy. But what I'm hearing right now is we want to keep intact the comments for the agenda items to 3 minutes. And the general comments, I don't know if we want to reduce those flat out to 2 minutes or leave them 3 minutes. Or one thing that I might propose is if there are more than 25 or 30, we reduce it to 2 minutes. I think we've done that a few times. We haven't, when we're talking about, I think we've had 24. One time we had 42, and we reduced that to 2 minutes. And one time we had 80. So I think maybe we might want to look at a number to say, and I'm throwing out there 30. If there's more than 30 in general comments, we reduce it to 2 minutes. And that's something that we can look at one way or another, and maybe I'll bring it back A or B at our next workshop. And the Neola contract, Dr. Aspen was trolloping off at the FADS conference last week when we came up with the agenda, and he wasn't there. And I think he wanted to wait to put that on the next agenda after he had more time. And so I apologize for putting that on here, but we thought we'd bring it up and we'd talk about it, as long as we're talking about policies anyway, talk about it a little more so that he had some direction from us on where he's going with that. Karen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I just want to say I too appreciate the work that you've been doing. I know it's not easy to bring us as board members together with a high-quality focus, and I respect your work. I have two pieces I'd like to address, and one is it sounds like we might have a majority board that are interested in tabling something that might be perceived as controversial, weighted with balances of the benefits it might bring. I just wanted to clarify my perception. And secondly, and most importantly to me, I just want to voice that I will support as Mrs. Goodwin was pointing out, and Superintendent Asplund, some immediate conclusions on our policies and those being updated. I'm happy to go with our superintendent's recommendation and get that underway, as well as I believe that it's real important to me that he has flexibility that I'd like to propose from a budgetary standpoint in getting the support that he needs with any policy work that we would be doing with our staff. I think that we all agree, at least I believe I've heard us all agree, the focus needs to be on achievement, and we're at a very pivotal point in maintaining high-quality schools, and we have the superintendent to do it. So I just wanted to reinforce Mrs. Goodwin and Superintendent Asplund. I'm ready to go with his recommendation.
Bridget?
Thank you. As far as Neola, I mean, one of the questions I had was on financial and then operational. If we don't fix that piece of the workflow, we wouldn't find ourselves in anybody's position. So I just want to make sure that that was, aware. I am concerned a little bit about the financial component of it and the impact it would have on staff. But if I'm understanding correctly, you're still going to evaluate it and come back to us? Okay. And then the final thing, I want to respond to Mrs. Brown's comments and also what was in the paper. I will tell you, I have a lot of passion for this, and I will listen to people who don't agree with me, and I have taken a myriad of shots from different political opinions because I'm vocal about what I believe. And I wouldn't want their time to be cut down, and I wouldn't want them to be called political activists or what have you, because I believe that they have that right to speak. But I also do agree, even at the last meeting, I was disgusted and appalled, and when people use profanity, it felt like we need to make sure we interrupt right then. I mean, that's it. That's the time to interrupt somebody. You say, you're warned, second time, per statute, they're removed. And I know it's not easy because I have been a chair during very, very polarizing, full room, probably 50-50 split, all sorts of things happening. I don't envy it. I know Mrs. Goodwin has had to chair some incredibly challenging and emotional meetings. I know it's hard. I believe it's important that people should be able to say things, and it's not all beautiful. But it's a lot of this feedback that I provided is being cautious of not further to stoke the fires, because it was happening. And I think last meeting you didn't interject as much, which I appreciate, because I think you wanted to see hopefully if it de-escalated the situation, and for the most part it did. And it was very disappointing. And I will say it publicly. It's disappointing when people behave that way. I don't care what they are standing for. I don't want any parent or any member of the community to feel concerned to come here, because that is a completely counterproductive to what I fight for so much, of having open public comment. So I will support that all day long, just as I think it's disgusting and foolish and highly inappropriate that people felt the need to go outside of your home, and I made that very publicly clear. I don't know who they are, but I would never back that for anybody else. I mean, that's absolutely inappropriate and counterproductive, and it bears no benefit to anybody. And so I'm sorry that you had to deal with that, and I hope that none of us have to deal with that. And we are in a very passionate time, and I think it's important that people don't get bucketed in to just, you're this and you're this and you're this, and then discounting them, because that's where we get to where we are today. And I try very hard not to do this, to do that. And I believe when I think of consistency, that's what I mean. It's an even playing field for everybody else. The rules apply to everybody. So when a fellow board member is charging statements that are politically charged and inaccurate and also and not interrupted, but then I get interrupted. I mean, I'm moving forward, but I have to highlight lack of consistency. I think we can move past it. We're adults. I believe we can do it. We've gotten through some crazy times before. When I was speaking to the policy, I think if the purpose is to help simmer, it's executing it fairly, trying to keep things calm, and removing people who absolutely are there, but if they're threatening you or any of us, if they're threatening any member of the community who are here to speak, because they have a right to speak as well, and if they're using profane language. And that is where I'll end that.
I also am not afraid to stand up and talk with somebody who doesn't agree with me. I've got 20-some years experience with that in public, and 40-some years of that with my husband. But in fact, I talked to the regular group that comes. I talked to them before the meeting and had some discourse back and forth, and I offered to stay after the meeting, and I did. There was at least a dozen people that stayed, and we talked in little groups, and then some of them talked to each other even. And we were here till at least an hour after the meeting and chatted. And I'm not going to do that, at 8 o'clock at night, but I will do that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon after a board meeting. And I think another thing that we're doing in this too is to give those people, if they want to have a back and forth, saying it's not a chance to dialogue. If you want back and forth, send an email to a board member, they'll send it back. If you want something out there in the public, send a public comment if you want. But I'm trying to give those parents who haven't had a chance to talk, who have been afraid to come, a chance to speak. And I don't think we should table this. I think we need to come back. I'm going to make those changes. I don't want to make any changes and then vote on it. I'm going to make some changes, bring it back at the next meeting, and then vote on it. Because I think that's what we need to do. And I think we as a board need to work at pulling this together. And if there's some language in here that you find objectionable, and if there's something about consistency that you don't think that we're doing, I think mark it down and we'll look at it, later. But I agree that we need to be consistent. And in fact, my attorney over here has said that if we shut down comments, personal comments about someone, if they're going to say, Shirley Brown, you're a tyrant, I can't say no to that and then also allow them to say, Bridget, you're my hero, or vice versa. Because if we're going to shut down personal comments, we have to shut down all personal comments, good or bad. Is that accurate?
It has to be content neutral.
Content neutral. So I can't be, looking at those things. So I try to be consistent on that. And I also think that some of this discussion that we're having, because I know there are people that are watching, so that they have an understanding what the rules are. And I think in this, whether it, that's the thing, is this a rule? Is this a bylaw? Or is this a policy? Because this looks more like a bylaw, but right now, we don't have a way to put bylaws in our policy. And we don't know what we're going to do with Neola, and that's kind of why we had it all together. But I will speak with our attorneys and someone and come back whether we're making this a policy or a bylaw. But I don't think that it's something that should be done in the dark with just us at the workshop and not voting on it. I think it's something that should be here, that we should allow the public to comment on, and that we should move forward with it. Mr. Edwards.
So I want to echo the sentiments, Mrs. Brown. I apologize that you've had this difficult time and this difficult job in such a heated time period, and no one should be put into the situation that you have, and you've done a great job, and I just want to make sure I say thank you as well. Thank you.
It's not the worst. The worst was some of the ones when then the abortion doctors were being shot, and we're standing out in front of the fighting for clinic access. But there were guns then, and hopefully it's just words and megaphones right now. Thank you.
And Mrs. Ziegler, I appreciate your comments. I hope that people were listening and that the community does hear what you have to say. And I wanted to say thank you. I hope that it helps and it matters. Back to Neola. I would say that your conversation today, Dr. Aspen, was new, that you wanted to look at both, because I thought our last conversation was that you felt Neola was the better direction. And I just wanted to say that having sat through a day of policy discussion, what I walked away with was, and I took to heart what Mrs. Rose said at the last meeting about we want to be focused on the strategic plan and instruction and all of those things. And I asked a lot of questions about that. And what I want to repeat is how does this move our strategic plan forward, was what I mentioned in my chat about the class. And what I'm feeling is that based upon our conversation, Dr. Asplin, that timing of having your staff take on this kind of project is killer important to make sure that the strategic plan is advancing and moving along. But at the same time, updating a lot of our policies and making sure that we have that side of the house with all the I's dotted and the T's crossed and have that review. I do think, based upon what my research and the class I attended, that that's the right direction. What confused me in your conversation is that the other company might be the right company, and based upon our previous conversation and my research is that they're too small and they can't really attack, and to Mrs. Ziegler's concern, I would rather spend less money and still be able to accomplish the same thing, but I'm not sure that they have the capacity to do that, so I was hoping you could comment on that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tom. And yes, I had conversations, I think, with each of you in one-on-one time. And today, right before we got together, is when Dan and I were able to get together and have this conversation. And he kind of cleared it up for me a little bit, too, about the fact that, those 400 policies need to be looked at because they have some revisions that need to be made. But the ones that I was looking at that came in, those 48 or 50, those were the ones that were revised because of the legislative session, and they're done. And we already paid for it. And so I'm thinking, if we take those and at least put those into play or have those voted upon, because I know they all have to be voted upon even when they're revised, if we put those in place because that went into effect July 1st, and you always get them probably in September, August or September, but they're done, we paid for them. But the second part of that conversation was we do have 400 policies. They all need to be looked at. It sounds to me like our folks are going to be doing a lot of the same work because we have to look through all of them after they've been revised. It's just which company do you want to revise them? And understanding that Neola is the gold standard, I get it. And you're right. And I've talked and I've worked with Tom Young, like I said. I just felt it necessary that I do my due diligence to make sure we look at NEFEC so I can come back to you and say, here's what NEFEC is all about. And then decide on those 400 policies and which company. My guess is from our conversations, probably Neola, because it is the gold standard. And if it's going to take as much time for our folks, no matter which company, why not look at the price and look at the company and look at the attorneys behind their revisions so that we can make a good decision on that. That was my only thing.
Yeah. I think you're doing the due diligence that the board asked you to do at the last workshop. And I appreciate that. And also, the thing about how much time is it going to take staff. We went through, this is before, Tom and Karen were elected. We did some procedure where we kind of looked through all the, I don't know how many years ago, but I think it even says in the policy we're supposed to look through them every once a year or something. I don't know. But I think it would really behoove all of us to do those exercises that you did that are in here. I don't think FSBA would mind, so that we all have an understanding of what the policies should do and what they should look like. And I don't know that it's all staff that has to go over these policies, because I think we had board members assigned to each section to go through some of these too, to look at some of the things. And I'm willing to work and to put my 2 cents in and to help. And I would like to see it done. I know we've got this. I do not want to conflict with what we're doing with the strategic plan.
Right.
I don't know if it's the same people that will be doing this. And I think one thing that we want to know too on the strategic plan is how much more work are we putting on our teachers and our school staff too, so that some of that thing we need to have come back to us about the strategic plan. But on this, I think that, we can look at, because we can look at how we can help, because we can. And I think it would be beneficial, and we would be doing a great service to the district and to the incoming board, that if Jane and I used our expertise and our years of service and all the money that we've been paid to work here for the school board, and just really, we're gonna knuckle down. I know she's busy with the referendum and all that, but it's gonna take a lot, and I think some of this it's gonna be on us to do, but I think we need to get it done and get it in order for the new board that comes on. And
And if I may, as far as the strategic plan is concerned, I think the fact that we have these 48 policies that have been revised and are ready to go based on this last legislative
we need to
session,
do those.
just put those in place. That's going to help us with strategic plan because that's short term. But looking at these 400 policies that we have, I don't remember the last time that's been done in Sarasota 3 years ago. But that is one in which we can choose the company and then move through slowly but surely over time, and it won't affect us as much with the strategic plan, and we don't have a big time limit on us as far as legislative session is concerned, because those aren't legislative changes, those are just looking at all the policies over time. But the 48 that are legislative revisions, I think we need to put in place now. That'll help us with the strategic plan, that short term, and then we move forward with the long game.
I would like to bring those other ones on the next board agenda, and get them out to you like ASAP, and I want you to look at them. Most of them is putting language in. We have to put words here and words there. A lot of it has to do with the the Parents' Bill of Rights, and the other legislation that was passed. And you can tell where it is because it's usually in a different color is the new legislation that you can look it up. And the Parents' Bill of Rights is that 1004 or something, 1001.
You have it. It was the first one on there.
That's in there. So, those are it's the Parents' Bill of Rights, and that's what a lot of them is. So what I'd like to do is normally we say, don't put it on the agenda and then, and don't put it in the workshop and the board agenda. I think because we're behind on this, we need to put it on the agenda for the workshop and to get it voted on to get advertised. And then, and a month later, get them to vote it on, and I would like, some agreement with that. If we can let the superintendent do that. If there's any objections, please let him know now. Jane,
I was just going to say that a lot of these policies that have to be revised, it's the work that has to go on within a department as the policy's being revised so that they do their procedures, so they know how to handle them. So in talking with some departments and trying to figure that out, is this going to take you a lot longer? Is this going to be more tedious? It was like, we have to have them. We have to know how to operate so that we're operating within the law. So they have no choice, and they're really eager to get those.
Bridget.
Yeah, so very simply stated, every year we have a legislative session, we get an update. NEFAC, for example, is the one that gives it to us. We get it in September. What are we in, October now? So, and having that system of, again, getting it to the departments, because what Mrs. Goodwin said is very true, and that then it be brought back to us. There are policy updates that we haven't always workshopped them if it's not a substantial change, it's a tweak or whatever, and it's red marked, so you can say this is in relation to legislation, give the statute, and then it be brought over, and we normally do a large amount if particularly at the end of after a legislative session. So I have no problem with that. I don't need to workshop any of them unless I would defer to you at that point unless you think they're substantially change that we need to be aware of. But outside of that, if it's legislatively driven, there's really not much we can say about it outside of have to approve it. So simply put, I think that we just, whatever it's going to take to get us up to snuff. And the other part is, as far as the other 400, I'm curious as to, because they have, my understanding is should have been getting them updated each year over year. And again, that's where I go back to the internal process. But I think we've really belabored this discussion.
Thank you. Well, I do think we ought to put them on the agenda, even if we don't spend a lot of time on them, only because we're into this routine where we're going to put it on an agenda before we vote on it. And I don't think we should change the policy or the procedure if, in fact, what is our policy on policies? That might be something we'll all look up. And I really think, for homework, if I can assign homework to all of us, do these exercises that are in this class that Tom went to, because I know I want to, because I said, what, I don't know what that is or where that is. So it'll get us an idea of where our policies are. So when we're talking about the Neola contract or the other contract at the next workshop or whatever, we'll all have some more understanding where we're coming from. And hopefully, we'll all look at these new changes that are coming, and if there's any questions on them, take them up with Dr. Asplin before we come to the table. And I think that's all we're going to talk about on policies. Or is there any more on policies discussion? I want to thank you. We had some heated discussions, but it's through heated discussions that we come to an understanding, and sometimes we have to do that. And I appreciate that. We are now on member comments, and you're not limited to 3 minutes. You can have as much time as you want on your member comments. Karen.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate as much time as I want. I
want to change my mind then.
Well, I understand. I would like to make a proposal, a recommendation to the board to put it as a workshop agenda item to discuss reducing workshops down to one workshop a month, and I'd like to just back up that proposal for a minute, if I could, please, a few minutes. It was in 2017 that we moved from minimal departmental participation and presentations and a tremendous amount of work being done to make presentations to the board, and that was a huge jump in workload for staff. Particularly at the district office, and for one workshop a month with those presentations to, we moved upon, my arrival on this board to 2 presentations a month. I would like the consideration, Mr. Edwards talked about how policies impact the strategic plan. I would like to address how procedures address the strategic plan, and I want to overemphasize, if I may please, that we are at a fork in the road of the strength of our the compelling challenges that our schools have faced and the weaknesses in where we stand academic performance-wise, and I think we have a superintendent, I know we have a superintendent that can not only maintain our quality but take us to higher levels. I would like to workshop what that means. As far as the amount of time we're taking of district staff, I strongly believe that for this school year that we need to go back to one workshop a month, which is much more than we did traditionally for many years. That's my proposal and my rationale and history as to why and what's at stake in the quality of our schools and the workload of our staff.
Thank you. And I think that's something that Dr. Asplin can, talk about, because Dr. Asplin is, help setting the agenda items, and when we talk, now we used to have, I remember back in 2006, way back when, we used to have principals and staff come and give updates on what their strategic plans, well, it wasn't strategic plans, what did they call it, the school
improvement plan?
School improvement plans. I remember we used to go to the schools and do the school improvement plans. Then they came to the workshops, and then they came like after the workshops, and we made them sit through board meetings, and like they were supposed to come after the 3:00 board meeting, and they'd say, all right, we'll meet you at 4:00, and sometimes we didn't meet them till 6. So, we've done some things to make sure that staff isn't there, but I would think that's something that you might want to look into and talk with your staff, because, I'm not sure, I'm sure they enjoyed hearing all of us this afternoon, but I don't know that we needed, all of our staff here, and you might want to be looking at, which staff needs to come to workshops, and, even, if our attorney needs to be there. Today, we were talking policy, and we had a meeting with him earlier, but, I think Karen makes a good point, and Jane has asked also, do we need 2 workshops a month? And let's look at it.
One workshop a month sounds great to me.
Let me tell you something I'd like to talk about at a workshop. The Just for Teachers newsletter the Department of Education puts out, and there is a grant program. It's reading scholarship accounts. It's run through the Step Up for Students, but it's any student enrolled in a Florida public school, grades 3 to 5, that received a 1 or a 2 in school year 2021-22 is eligible for up to a $500 scholarship that they can use to help with reading. They could use that to perhaps buy a computer, to hire a tutor, or maybe a program in our school. I want to know what we're doing or to reach out to these parents to let them know that that's available and to have something available to them. And I understand we're looking at, I know I've talked to you about this before, but I want to know how many students we have in grades 3 and 5 that are at a 1 and 2, and if there's something, that we're offering to them, or letting them know that they can do this. If nothing else, tell them you can use this to buy books, you can use this to get a tutor, you can use this to buy a computer. Because I think, we're neglectful if we don't offer this to our students. I would hope, and I'd rather do it next. Put that on your list of things to talk about. Bridget.
I just wanted to, well, one, I will go with yes. I would be great to see us reduce the workshops. I think we upped the ante with COVID and a new superintendent, but I agree. I know our staff has an abundant amount of things to do, and I know they work really hard for what we present. So if that's something that with what we have coming down the pipe actually makes sense from a scheduling standpoint, I would definitely be in support of that. The other thing is I wanted, speaking of workshops, to add something to it. Is I know also Mr. Edwards had brought this up, but I do want to make sure in a very near workshop we do bring up the evaluation so we can get that rolling and aligned to the strategic plan. So just wanted to put that forward to see that because there's only so many months left in the year.
You want the superintendent's evaluation that we have to do in June?
We need to create it so it aligns to the strategic plan.
Okay. Yeah, are we going to do the evaluation in September, did you say? Yeah, we'll do it in September when we get the scores back, or are we not using scores?
Okay, no. It's to create his goals and the evaluation that now aligns to the strategic plan. We wanted to wait until the strategic plan was done. Then, so that we're not in the situation we were last year, is now we are going to put the evaluation together aligned with the strategic plan and then evaluate him, depending if we say June or September, but that's in 2022.
Yeah, so I would think we would want to evaluate him on some things other than the strategic plans, like how he's working with the board members and things like that, too.
So a workshop just to discuss your evaluation. Does that work? Thank you.
Okay. Tom?
Yeah, I'm totally open to addressing the workshops. I think also if we, perhaps if we could have more things on the workshop if we needed, but I've said this to Dr. Aspin several times. The amount of time that goes into these PowerPoint presentations that they're gorgeous, but they're, in my opinion, unnecessary. What I saw today, particularly in and around the the solar panels. This is how much it would cost. This is, and we got the Cliff Notes version. That's perfect. And we got through that conversation in about 15 minutes. So you could have more things if we needed to talk about, but I don't need all of and to Mrs. Rose's point, I'd rather them focused on executing to the strategic plan and instruction and achievement gap and all the things that I've mentioned before.
Dr. Asplin.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, all great feedback. Thank you very much for all of that. October 27th, I don't think that's on your calendar yet, but that will be on your calendar, hopefully. 9 till noon on October 27th at STC is when we were going to have more of a data type workshop. And in that, not workshop or retreat or whatever you want to call it, but talking about FSA data, iReady data, and then bringing in 8 different principals from different levels, including 2 from our charter schools, to just give a quick 10-minute presentation as far as what they're doing after analyzing their data and what they're doing to help their students. And so I think that's going to be a really great day. And part of that, too, is talking about this reading scholarship, talking about what we are doing with the reading pilot that we've been granted from the state, the $700,000, and the fact that we're using that with our students with disabilities in their area of reading. But we'll talk through all of that, and we're putting all of that on that 3-hour period of time at STC on October 27th. So I hope that date works.
So this is kind of like a workshop, but it's more of a public forum that we're coming to.
Yes. So it'll be at at STC where we were in that room last year that we were able to set up chairs for others if they wanted to come. That's what we're going to do. Instead of having it in here every time, we thought we'd have it there, show the data, have the principals come in. I think it'd be a great morning for us all. And then as far as my evaluation is concerned, I know that our staff right now, as you saw with the strategic plan draft, we were looking at over a 5-year plan as far as metrics. And I know over these 2 weeks, they are working on metrics, 1-year metrics, that we'll be able to bring back and be able to create that evaluation. And so I should have all of that data by the 3rd week in October to be able to share with you in one-on-one situation. I've also invited Corey Gordon to be with us during our one-on-ones in case there were questions about the information behind the scenes. If you had some of those questions as well, she's going to be there to pull those up because our staff works in that PIM, which is really, I think I wrote where the sausage is made or how the sausage is made. They work in the PIM area, which helps them create the metrics, create the strategies, revise the strategies. There's a lot of information behind the scenes, and it's not to be. We're not trying to not be transparent. It's just the way of work so that we can create a 29-page strategic plan that everybody can see and understand what we are doing. And so when they have some other information to give me in the next 2 weeks, we should have those 1-year metrics, which is going to help us create that evaluation. Okay? I think that's it. Any other questions for me?
So are we having a workshop on the 19th? I mean, but I don't know what else we have, but I know we'll look at it. I don't know what else you have, but if we have one, we'll try to make it short for the afternoon only, correct? Or do you still have things to do on your list?
No, I think at least this next workshop and board meeting coming up on the 19th, I guess, is the next one. The 15th, 19th, I'm not sure, whatever date that is. That would be a regular workshop and a regular board meeting. And then the October 27th would be that special data retreat, school improvement plan retreat, if you want to call it that. And then as far as starting, the fact that you just want to have one board meeting or one workshop a month, we can start that whenever you'd like. If you want to start that in November, we could. And we can go through and look at the calendar and readjust.
time is of the essence for this staff to be able to focus on achievement. I wanted to solidify a plan and relieve them of what their future focus can be.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think on October 27th, I mean, not only is that going to help you to see what our principals are doing and what we're doing, that really does help us as well. So it's going to help everyone.
Okay, all right, so we'll be that on the 27th. And Karen, did you have something else, or was that it?
I just was trying to solidify. It sounds like we have that the public and we as board members can expect in November to move to one board meeting. And if something comes up and we need to add something as has been procedures in the past, we could, just so staff knows what the future focus might enable for performance and achievement.
Okay, got it. I see no other comments. We are going to adjourn the workshop. I'll see you all back here at 6 o'clock. Why have I got a board reorganization on Tuesday the 21st? That's just silly. We're not going to have that. I'm sorry, what? These aren't as good as I thought they were. Well.
Hello, how are you? Good.
But sometimes.